Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show on a Tuesday at 11:07, 7 minutes after 11. Beautiful winter day, beautiful winter morning. We had a really nice little storm last night. A little nice. It was a nice little surprise. I wasn't expecting us to have a few inches of snow. We probably got two or three here, but it was really pretty drive home. I went to a friend's house to see a movie. Um, and today's show is about this movie. That it was a movie did not know anything about. I went into it cold. A buddy of mine asked me about going over to his house to watch a movie, and we have a lot of the same kind of interests. And he's not as probably my friend Zafra. He's not into horror films as much as I am, but he's really into you know well, he's way into science fiction. He does like horror quite a bit, but to a point, and foreign films and all kinds of things. And he's pretty open minded to all kinds of. He's turned me on to some cool movies, and so we have a lot of the same interests. So I figured, well, he sent me this link about this movie, and it's this Japanese movie called The Cure, and it came out in 1997. It was directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Japanese film, English subtitles. Didn't know anything about it, so I saw it last night. He sent me a link to this movie, and I just briefly glanced at it. I didn't really look at it too much because I figured, well, I want to be surprised. I'll go for it and just go into it totally cold. And man, what a awesome movie. I was kind of blown away by this movie. I was totally into it. One of the things that I find, like a lot of times I talk about when art kind of resonates with with your person, or with you, you know, when you get a physical reaction. You obviously get an emotional reaction, but when you get a physical reaction, because that comes with the emotional, usually that's your body and mind telling you that, wow, this was a really good, satisfying experience. And I totally had that feeling after watching The Cure last night. I was a little bit tired. I didn't sleep so well the night before, and so, but I left the movie totally like jazzed up, totally amped up, and I was excited, and I was really, really pumped, and I was just like, yes, this is awesome. So I went over last night and watched this movie, The Cure, or Cure, from 2017. I went into it totally cold. It's it was, and again, it came out in 1997. The other thing that was really cool, my friend Zafar got it on Blu-ray, and it was part of the Criterion collection. Criterion put it out, I guess, really recently. It just came out on Blu-ray, and it's gorgeous. It is just spectacular. Visually, it's an incredible experience. This film is such a unique premise too. It's essentially like a murder mystery movie about a serial killer, and it definitely has elements of horror. It's a very it's very surreal. It has this very dreamlike quality. It's very slow, but amazing. The atmosphere for this film is just extraordinary. The music is so incredible. There's um there's quite a few scenes in this film of where it is so ominous and brooding, like, and you just feel it. You just feel the intensity being slowly turned up, and there's in some of these scenes there's virtually no dialogue whatsoever, and it's kind of extraordinary. And I've said, many times in the past, I'm a big fan of the idea of, like, less is more. A lot of the times you can get a point across, as far as being, when it pertains, say, to film, you can kind of get your point across more, with actually speaking less or showing less, because it goes to that thing of, if a person is drawn in, the viewer, they there is something that's resonating with them, the story, the characters, the richness of the kind of the texture of the film, or the vibe of the film even. And if you have that, where you're being pulled into this kind of new world, you're going to go along for the ride. But in the case of where it's kind of the less is more aesthetic or scenario, it leaves so much room for interpretation. There's space for you to kind of like take in what's going on, the process to process what you're experiencing. And it leaves so much, the main thing is it leaves so much up to your imagination. And it's like, it's like that famous quote by, the iconic master jazz trumpet player Miles Davis, where he said it's really, the music is really about the space between the notes. It's not necessarily the notes, it's the space in between. And I feel like that is such a great concept that you can apply to, like, everything. So, but what an extraordinary movie! And this movie, again, it's essentially a serial killer movie, but it has supernatural elements. It's very surreal. It feels like you're in this dream. The other thing that's so striking about this movie is just, I don't really want to go into too much detail. I highly, highly recommend this movie. So I want to keep it, anybody who might check out this video, or sees this movie, I want to keep it a surprise. The last movie I saw that had that kind of impact on me was the my video that I did on this Australian movie, Lake Mungo, where I went into it really cold, and there's very obviously very different kind of a movie, but the kind of the way it's laid out, the real minimalist kind of approach, and then it ends up becoming such a highly effective experience. It's Cure is similar to Lake Mungo, the way that is, the way the narrative is, the way the whole story is kind of laid out, the way the experience is. Really, really great. And I was so surprised. The other thing, again, without giving anything away, is this film does have elements of horror, and but it has this thing of where it really totes the line of, is this real? Is this not real? And it does such a brilliant job of doing that. And the actual premise, like the meat and potatoes, as to what this film is about, like particularly centered around the series of murders that happen, and particularly around the killer, if you will, of the film, is so awesome and so original. I've never seen this kind of angle on, say, a serial killer film. And the premise is so awesome and so original. Startlingly, it's kind of startling on how original this film is, especially centered around the premise of what's really happening here. And I can't recommend this film enough. And again, beautifully shot. There's one scene in particular, just to kind of give you an idea what this film is like. There's one scene in particular in this movie that really stood out, and I still think about it. Again, I watched this last night, but there's one scene in particular in this movie, The Cure, Cure, that really resonated with me. That I thought was probably the most powerful scene in the film. Again, it's a very slow-paced movie, definitely a slow burn film, which I'm, a sucker for. I love that kind of aesthetic. But there's one scene in particular where you're kind of, sort of, you know, you're not really sure, but you kind of get a sense of this thing of where you're kind of being introduced to who the killer is of the film, who is the person or persons who are, who is possibly responsible for these mysterious murders that are happening. And there's a scene where there's this supposed, killer and one other person where they're essentially on this beach. And there's this long panning scene of them on the beach, and there's very, very little dialogue. And it's so beautifully shot. It's like a gorgeous art painting. It's so well shot, and the music is so incredible. And there is this, and again, there's nothing happening in the scene. There's virtually nothing happening. There's only maybe a couple of lines of dialogue if that. But you're just, you get this sense of like impending doom, and it's super dark, but it's so atmospheric, and yet you're not really in a traditional sense. There's not like rapid fire, like a rapid fire scenario of dialogue. It's just this long, and it's a long scene, and it's incredible. It's probably my favorite scene. It's the most atmospheric portion of the film. I think it was when this scene came into frame, when we were watching it, when it, when this was happening in the moment, I felt like, wow, okay, I'm into this movie. Like this is an experience, and that's where I felt like was the key moment, or the when it I felt really connected to this movie. Such a great film. I can't recommend it enough. And it's disturbing. It's a very dark film, but again, it's beautifully shot, incredibly, just gorgeous. Beautiful atmosphere, really great acting. The writing for this film is incredible. The screenplay is incredible. The direction is incredible. The music is so rich and atmospheric. Such a great film. I would definitely love to buy this on Blu-ray and see it again. And it's a film too that there's a lot of depth to it, and there's a lot of subtlety. And I could see this film. I could see watching, like, by watching this film, quite a few other times in the future, like revisiting it. I could see, because there's a lot of, the well is deep in this film, for this film, that I could probably get a lot of different things out of it, and it would be, I would realize certain things and certain aspects that I might not have before, or say the first time I, like, watching it last night. There's a lot of depth to this film, somewhat to a degree, like a lot to unpack, but amazing film, one of the best films I've seen in a while. Cure. The Japanese know how to do it right. So I can't recommend this movie enough. And so thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.